Hello and welcome to the first episode of The Verdict for 2023. I'm Alan Barty.
I'm Paul Schuhart.
And I'm Talon Jones.
Since we are in Black History Month, during this month's episodes, we're going to be talking about black movies, shows, and cartoons. This is The Verdict. The first show that we'll be talking about is a show from the early 2000s and also a Disney Channel show, That's So Raven. In this episode, Raven is trying to get a job at a clothing store, but it's denied because she is black. Let's take a quick look at the trailer.
Disney Channel's got brand new episodes of That's So Raven, and that means more smooth moves.
We are two foxy mamas you just don't want to mess with.
More manly men, and more Eddie being Eddie.
I think I got a new girlfriend, and I'm scared.
And of course, more totally ridiculous schemes that almost never work.
Like we say in Jersey, accidents happen.
On That's So Raven, weekends at 7, 6 Central on Disney Channel.
Okay, so just to get started on the episode, pretty much as I said, Raven is trying to get a job at a clothing store, and she's trying to get a job along with her friend Chelsea. And the thing about it is that the whole interview, Raven is doing way better than Chelsea. She's like folding the clothes better, taking care of the customers better, doing everything perfect. And so, you think hey, she would eventually get the job. But then, when the phone call comes, Chelsea's the one that gets the job and not Raven. And the thing about Raven is that Raven can see the future. For anyone who knows That's So Raven, who's my age, we all grew up with That's So Raven, Raven can see the future, and that's pretty much the purpose of the episode. And so what happened was that Raven sees a vision where she pretty much saw the manager who was interviewing her say that she doesn't hire black people. And growing up, as a black kid, this was the episode that I was the first to see that really tackled racism. And not racism that said, being called certain words or certain phrases, but being denied a job because of the color of your skin. And look, I love this episode because it really touches on black history, really delves into not just Raven, what Raven's going through, but also what her brother is going through. Because pretty much her brother has to write an essay about Black History Month. And the parents in the episode are pretty much telling him hey, I know you think Black history is something that doesn't affect you, not in the past, but it really was important because without Black history, you wouldn't have your favorite music nowadays, you wouldn't have the same opportunities as other kids. So I really do love this episode. What do you guys think about it?
Oh, I used to watch That's So Raven all the time when I was little. I think every kid our age did. Yeah. And this was a particularly standout episode. I think I saw this when I was 6 or 7. And I didn't know racism was a thing at the time. I guess I was naive and sheltered. Mm-hmm. This was the first exposure to that, actually. And I was like, what? Why didn't she get the job? I kept asking, why didn't she get the job? Why didn't she get the job? And my parents had to explain, you gotta watch the episode. You gotta understand, because they were watching with me, and they said there are people in the world who are racist and will do that to other people. I was like, but that makes no sense. I kept going back to that. But I remember this episode also rewatching it. It's kind of the perfect episode to watch for someone who's never seen the show because it has Raven's awesome disguises. It has the great comedy, the parents being very supportive and loving. Corey's side plot is also very interesting. That's also the perfect gateway episode just so anyone who's never seen the show and wants to get into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is the first time I actually saw this episode. I've seen the show, and so I thought it did just an excellent job of balancing really serious issues with actual really funny humor. I was actually watching it earlier today, and I was laughing out loud a couple times. I was like, this is pretty funny and really relatable, especially Corey's kind of journey that he goes through. Because I think a lot of people, at least for me, when growing up, I was like, I don't know. I was like, why should I bother learning or caring too much about history? And I think as I've gotten much older, and there's a lot more of me that's trying to respect and try to learn more about Black history. I try to every as much as I can now.
Oh yeah, so I really do want to touch upon what Corey's going through because throughout the whole episode, what I do like about it is that they are bringing up topics of hey, these are these dead people, quote unquote, in these books. Because of them, you're able to have the stuff that you do have. I love how they talk about their origin of hip hop because the thing about it is that with African music and then it expanded to gospel music, and gospel music expanded to jazz music, and jazz music expanded to hip hop. You know, all these like ragtime, like all these different genres of music, you know, build upon it. And what I do love about it is that, you know, the father is telling me like, hey, like these are people that did have to struggle for you to have these things, and they do bring up the concept of true racism in these shows.
Yeah, and just Raven and her friend's reactions to the whole thing just felt so genuine. And Eddie's story about his friend Freddie, that still actually brings a tear to my eye. Because I was, I think, 7 or 8 years old when this episode came out, and I could just imagine some of the kids being torn away from one of my best friends because of the color of our skin. Like, the idea of something like that happening actually did scare me at one point, that something like that could happen. And it has happened to other kids. So that was one standout scene in the episode.
Yeah, I actually was reading that the father of the show actually directed this one.
Really?
Yeah, and so it put a whole different perspective on it for me going and knowing that, because he's really vocal, I think, much more than he is in most episodes. He's really a potential character.
Yeah, this was actually my introduction to Frederick Douglass, who I actually did a report on in middle school. So, yeah, this episode introduced me to him, and I actually read a lot about him in middle school, and was like, this guy was kind of awesome.
Yeah, and just to touch upon that, the thing is that a lot of people don't know this, that African American, Black History Month used to be Negro Week, and it was just a 1 week, and because of Black History Month, we are able to better learn and understand these Black figures, because before Black History Month, people didn't really know Frederick Douglass. People didn't really know about all these really important Black figures. And I know the question is okay, why do we still need Black History Month? That's been a big thing in the Black community. And for me, I would just like Black History Month just to be taught as just regular American history. And I mean, that's something that nowadays is something that is a struggle for a lot of schools. Not going on the whole soapbox, but it is something that is brought up. Hey, can kids really grasp Black history? And there's argument that teaching Black history makes somebody racist and offending another group of people who are not part of Black culture. But I mean, as you said before, the lighting things up better. This episode is really funny. It does show off Raven disguises. The thing about the episode is not a Debbie Downer about the whole thing. They do sprinkle in humor just to lighten things up. Because I think you need humor in a very serious topic, but they know when to get serious and when to get funny.
Oh yeah, and I do have to admit, rewatching it, the scene with Corey's meeting all these Black figures in history. As I was watching, I'm like, this looks like one of those really cheesy education specials they would show in schools. Those 10 to 20 minute specials they would always show to kids. So it's it really does have that feel. But granted, I kind of loved those as a kid. So I don't mind.
The funny thing is, there was a commercial that my dad showed me, and it was a soul kind of glow with Frederick Douglass about hair products. I'll show it to you later. But just to change topics a little bit, right now we're about to take a commercial break, and then when we come back, Paul is going to introduce his show. We'll be right back.
Yo, camping buddy. Okay, you guys ready?
Dude, I thought you were driving.
I thought you were driving.
Oh, I never said I was driving.
I definitely can't drive.
If you're high, just don't drive. It's illegal everywhere. If you feel different, you drive different.
Wherever you...
Today's show that I'm going to talk about is Atlanta. And this is actually one of the standalone episodes that the show sometimes will release. But normally the show is about this rapper named Paperboy and his cousin named, what's his name? Earl. And so this is one of the standalone episodes that has nothing to do with the rest of the plot. And this is just about this guy who finds out that his family history is coming back to haunt him a little bit. How about we check out the trailer?
What is this about?
Your family owned my great-great-grandmother and father for 12 years. You owe me money.
They can look you up and force you to pay.
This concerns all of us, Willie.
No, it don't, Ashley.
Welcome back. Yeah, this I think this is probably one of my favorite episodes from this season. I think this is season 3, and this season was probably one of the best one that the show has had. And this is like this episode I think takes on so many different just like issues and tries to tackle it all at once while also trying to stay funny and like relevant to like today. So, what do you guys' thoughts on that?
Okay, so like I've never seen an episode of Atlanta, not because I want to, because there's so many shows out there, and I like to keep my time. And when I first watched it, like I didn't know how it was gonna go because it was filmed like with a very like moody atmosphere throughout the whole thing, and there were moments where I was kind of mad, not our protagonist, but a specific type of person, Shaniqua. Because like it's one of those things where it was tackling the topic of like what was it like reparations. What people don't know is that basically in the Black community it means like like Black people getting like some money or some form of support either from the government or from the descendants of slave owners. Because the thing about slavery is that when slavery ended, a lot of Black people had to build up their wealth out of nothing. And even when they were able to build up that wealth, a lot of their towns were burned down, churches were burned down, they were constantly being terrorized. Like, the thing about it is that Black people weren't even fighting for, because this was the same time around like the women's like suffrage. And it's like one of those things where Black people were just fighting for, human rights. That's what Frederick Douglass was like, hey, we need to get human rights and we need to get the Black men like a way to vote because right now we're just being slaughtered and not even treated as, people. And it was that thing of like, I don't want to blame somebody who's not responsible for what happened in the past. But at the same time, we should have a discussion about the past, but not hurt people who have nothing to do with it. Like I'm the kind of person who wants to build bridges and not tear them down if I can. Like that's just my opinion. But I don't know, it's very interesting how the episode went on because, it tackled like the other side of what you can say, Caucasian people have to go through and what their perspectives, or what certain Caucasian people's perspectives are about, racism and the topic of, I'm sorry, what was the word again?
Reparations.
Reparations, sorry. Gotta remember the reparations, my bad.
I read that the writer, I think it was a she. I'm just gonna say they, because I don't know. They wanted to go in through it with the idea of like the possible, like everybody's horrors of what they think reparations means.
Okay.
And like the type of like people that might like appear,
Yeah, because I don't know if it was like, okay, it's supposed to be real or is it supposed to be very satirical, very like...
Oh yeah, I think it's meant to be like very much.
Oh yeah, because there came a moment where, everyone see the episode, Shaniqua comes in asking reparations while this man and his daughter are trying to eat, and she's like doing this whole thing with like, I don't know if TikTok was around the time.
Yeah, she was like live streaming on Instagram, I think, and I was just like, what you're doing is technically illegal. You can't just go into this guy's house and refuse to leave. That is actually illegal, and filming him without his consent on his property, like, that is illegal.
Yeah, because as it went on, I was like, is she a stalker? Because there's one moment in the beginning where he accidentally steals some, what was it, Madeline's? Those, what was it, macaronians?
Yeah. Some little thing from a coffee shop.
Yeah, I was like, is someone from the coffee shop gonna get him? Like, what's going on? And I don't know, I was kind of getting mad at her. And it's like one of those things where throughout the show, I was like, look, just because I'm Black, I'm not gonna always be on the Black person's side in the story. And it made me question, and it's like, well, is this right? Is this good? Because the thing at the end was that there was a moment where he, was working at a restaurant because he apparently like lost his job and lost a lot of his money. And
he seemed happy though. That was the ironic thing.
And he actually like learned a different language, and to me, like I think the episode was about like understanding in a way.
Yeah, that's what the guy he met at the hotel was telling him, who ironically committed suicide afterwards. But I was like, what you were saying made a lot of sense, so why did you suddenly take that dark turn?
Yeah, I was kind of mad at you because I was enjoying happy laughs with That's So Raven, revealing my childhood, and then it just took a major tone shift.
Yeah, I've seen this show before. I've seen the first 2 episodes with my friend Chase. He highly recommended it. We're both big fans of Donald Glover, so he's like, oh, you got to watch Atlanta then, because I'm a big fan of Donald Glover from Community as well as his music career. And I watched, I'm like, I don't know if I would enjoy this show long term because honestly, his character in the show was kind of unlikable. Mm-hmm. And Yeah, it had this very moody feel to it. I'm like, I don't feel like I would enjoy this. I'll give it another try someday.
I don't know. When I go to a show, I just want to feel happy. I want to feel uplifted. I don't want to feel mad. I don't want to call you 2 a.m. in the morning and be like, why would you make me watch this? What's wrong with you?
But in all honesty, I actually did have some thoughts where I was like, Shaniqua kept calling him through an unknown number before she finally went to his house. Part of me kept thinking, if he had answered the phone, do you think they could have had a mature conversation? It could have gone differently?
But the thing is that it's unknown. He hasn't even met her yet. And she just barges in at his house. Like, if it was one thing where, like, she caught him at, like, maybe he was sitting down having a cup of coffee, or maybe at work, or try to get into contact with him through an email and be like, hey, can we talk? All this kind of stuff. But the thing is, like, she just barged in, and I was getting kind of mad at her because I was like, look, like, if I was able to find out, hey, like, one of my friends or someone I don't know, like, owned my family back in the day, then maybe we can have a conversation. But I don't know if I would, like, have enough strength to just barge into somebody's house.
Actually, I kind of thought he actually messed up severely when he was at work, and he asked for advice from one of his coworkers. And it was actually good advice, where he said, look, just apologize and give her what money you can. Like, maybe don't have to pay the entire amount she's asking for. She was asking for $3 million that he clearly didn't have. So, like, just tell her you're sorry and just try to make it up to her. Try to give her something. But he immediately ignored that advice and went to his other coworkers to ask for their advice. And I'm like, he gave you good advice. Why didn't you follow it?
Yeah, a major theme in the episode is the idea of invisibility, right? You know, as you say, he accidentally steals a cookie from, like, the coffee shop. Yeah. And he's able to cut in line because someone's arguing, but he's able to ignore it. You know, he never really has to think about his history or where he's come from, and he's well off, but he never has to really consider, like, how he got his job, or, you know, the privileges that has allowed him to live his lifestyle.
Yeah. And just to piggyback on that, because there was one scene that was really interesting to me, is was when he finally picked his daughter up from school, and and basically in the scene, she says that one of the kids, who they don't see saving the race, but she just said, like, hey, Dad, are we racist? And he was like, what, no. And the thing is that racism and prejudice are very on a spectrum, ranging from different things. And it's like one of those things where I don't immediately want to put out the racist card, because that can immediately, like, damage the word, and we're not even talking about, you know, the actual topic at hand. And, like, I don't know, like, even at the end, because I remember you brought up, you know, when the guy who gave me advice at the hotel, you know, like killed himself in the pool. There was one moment where I noticed that one of the servers who was black, you know, wasn't even bothered by it. And he was like, oh,
there goes another one.
And then at the end, you know, they show him, like, he's now works at a restaurant, but then he show him that he and other waiters who are white are serving, you know, a bunch of black people. And then I'm trying to think, okay, maybe that's a commentary of how now black people are rising to the top of it. But, you know, this show is very complex. But what's not complex is the next commercial break coming up, and we'll be right back with your show right after this.
Wherever you see a flower, a bird, a beautiful tree, know that my love is with you as you bring our colorful stories to the world.
Make the forest part of your story at a park near you. Find one at discovertheforest.org.
Welcome back. The show I chose is one I continue to watch on repeat, and that is The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. What started out as a light-hearted comedy to promote Will Smith's rapping career evolved into what many consider to be the best sitcom of all time. And it wasn't afraid to have more down-to-earth scenarios and acknowledge real-world issues. Let's take a look at Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Yeah, my cousins kind of think of me as the brother they always wanted.
More like the brother we never expected.
I kind of keep them down to earth, you know? Eat some outer space. I love my cousins, and they love me.
He'd be easier to love if he still lived in Philadelphia.
The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, all week long.
Weeknights at 6 on Fox 45/48.
It was hard to pick a particular episode, but I chose to focus on the season 4 episode, Blood is Thicker Than Mud, where Will and Carlton attempt to join a fraternity, and in the process, tackling issues such as identity and loyalty. Do either of you have any thoughts on this Fresh Prince episode?
Yeah, this episode, I mean, the show has a long reputation of just having some really deep and really open conversations that surrounds a lot of these episodes. And I wasn't familiar with this one because there's so many other ones that I think a lot of people point to that I thought you were going to point to.
I considered it. I was considering the one where with Will's dad. I was considering the one where it was a very early episode where they got pulled over by a racist cop. I was even considering the one where the gambling episode, where Uncle Phil had to hustle the hustler, basically. I even considered that one, but I was like, this one particularly got me with two great scenes by two characters. Like, first by Carlton standing up for himself, saying, "I'm happy with who I am. And if you can't accept that, then there's something wrong with you, not me." But the thing that really hit it home and said, this is serious, was Uncle Phil at the end, where he said, "I've worked so hard to give my family a good life, and now apparently there's something wrong with that. We're being penalized for that. What's wrong with this world?" And I'm like, that's a really good point, because there are people who work extremely hard, and yet people say, "Oh, you didn't struggle enough. You're high up, so you don't get to say anything anymore."
I mean, like, this episode really tackles the idea in the Black community of, not forgetting where you come from, and, like, it also tackles the thing of, like, oh, if Black people act, quote unquote, too white. Like, a lot of times, like, for me growing up, like, during high school, there were moments where I was acting white or something like that, but I didn't even know what that meant. I guess because I wasn't using too much slang, I wasn't doing the quote unquote thing the other Black kids were doing. And the thing that got me about, Uncle Phil's speech, where he was like, when we guys are doing this to each other, it goes the idea of, like, like, when Black people will try to be successful, a lot of times, other Black people in the Black community will see it as, oh, you're just trying to act white, you're just trying to, fit in with all the white people, which I think is ridiculous. Like, I am a Black man, I love being Black, but I also love, Black cartoons, I love anime, I love all these other Black pop culture stuff. I'm lucky that my parents were able to be successful. Like, we still talk about Black issues. Like in Carl's speech, just because you have this level of success, I have this level of success, doesn't mean we don't walk the same streets. Doesn't mean we don't look. Doesn't mean that people don't look at us differently when we go into a store, or when we walk down like a sidewalk, or when we have to be careful around the police or anything like that. Like, because at the end of the day, like, a lot of times people don't see me; they just see the color of my skin. And it hurts sometimes, okay, but at the end of the day, I'm gonna be who I am. I'm gonna act like who I am, and that's just gonna be it.
Yeah, I think I connected with this episode because Carlton actually reminds me of someone I actually did know in high school. I don't know if you remember them. Their name was Andre. I believe their last name was Harris. But basically, they weren't my best. We were acquaintances. Like, we hung around the same group. But he was a Black kid who loved bands like Metallica and Slayer. And and his favorite band of all time was Pantera. In fact, Dimebag Darrell was his favorite guitar player of all time. He was his hero, and he idolized him. He actually learned to play guitar too. He was actually really good, but a bunch of kids kept making fun of him, saying he was white. They kept saying, "You keep acting white just because he liked Metallica and Pantera," and that really bothered him because he was like, "I just want to play guitar. I like these bands. How should that affect who I am?"
I mean, and even the show, Will like make fun of Carlton for acting quote unquote white, and that's like a running thing in the show. But Will does it as like a playful way because Carlton acts very like
very Manilow.
What was the joke at the end? It wasn't like something about a tree. It's take a.
It was make like a tree and leave it. He's like, I wouldn't say that. I would say make like a banana and split.
Make a banana and split. And the thing is that like this episode probably can go into the topic of, like code switching, where we all like a lot of times black people have to present themselves in different scenarios. Like I remember this one story of me when I worked at Smoothie King, where my manager, who was also black at the time, was like, hey, like some customers have been complaining that your voice sounds too aggressive, and so I had to put on the more quote unquote proper speaker, like, hello sir, how can I help you? Like all that kind of thing.
Oh, you mean like the movie Sorry for Bothering You?
Yeah. Yeah, that's another topic, but
I think this issue is it's a very complex issue because on one hand, whiteness is seen as both as in the idea of like power and wealth, and I think for the guy in the frat, I think that was his major issue, is that Carlton comes from money.
Yeah, even though Carlton worked harder than every other pledge in the entire thing.
Yeah,
they put him through.
Yeah.
Plus, they made him work the hardest. They gave him the harder jobs, hoping he would quit, and he actually pulled through. Yeah. He didn't even complain. I'm like, how can you not respect that? That's impressive. He ate a giant fish.
I guess it's that idea where the guy was coming from, the idea of like, hey, like you have a brother, you have money, you're not struggling like the rest of y'all. You don't have to deal with all these issues. Like you made it, and it's like, no, like, yeah, look, my parents are successful. I'm being successful. My brother's successful, but we still black. We still hold it down. We still listen to black artists. We still go to black churches, all that kind of stuff. Like I ain't different from nobody, and just because I am black doesn't mean I'm different from any other race out there. And I know maybe we could go to the idea of sometimes people see, whiteness as the standard and see blackness as something else, like away from that. And if a black person tries to be successful or tries to not be quote unquote black enough, then they're abetting their heritage or something like that. And I don't think it's right, because I think that just damages, the black community. And when we try to, and it just does, and when we need to come together, like we can't like come together on a certain goal, like let's see, like police reform or anything else, they were all split like that.
Yeah, it just puts the whole question of identity in general. Like, hell, I love music like Jimi Hendrix and B.B. King and Chuck Berry, as well as later groups like Run DMC.
You're not allowed to hear it. I'm just joking with you.
Yeah, like Run DMC and stuff like that. And people question that because I also love punk bands, but I love bands like the Bad Brains or Pure Hell, and it's like, these were all black bands, and I love them, and what does that say about me? It's like, I just like what I like. People like what they like, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Of course.
Yeah, it reminds me of this movie, Medicine for Melancholy, I think. And one of the main issues is the main character. He's unable to figure out if he himself should see himself as first black or as a person, like as like an individual. And it's really just about like this relationship that he has with this one night stand, and so she's like, no, you're a person before you're anything else, and so he's like, well, no, I'm black before I'm anything else, regardless of anything else that is going to happen to me, the world's always going to see me as black, and so they both have like really compelling arguments.
Yeah, I'm actually taking this women's literature class, and my teacher brought up the idea of how people first see you, and the idea is that first people see you the race. For instance, people see me as black, then people see me as a man, and then people see me as something else, and then see wealth and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's very interesting and very complicated. But thank you all for joining us for this week's episode of The Verdict. We'll see you next week, where we continue to celebrate Black History Month, where we talk about our favorite black animation and cartoons. Bye-bye, everyone. I hope you guys have a good one.